This Sunday on Rosemary Barton Live. So are you prepared to have an election if that's where we end up?
I'm prepared for an affordable budget. That's what I want the government to introduce.
Just days before the federal budget, an exclusive interview with the leader of the official opposition. Will Pierre Poilievre support the budget? What would he do in the face of Donald Trump's tariffs? And how confident is he about winning his upcoming leadership review? And our Sunday Scrum will talk about the big test for the Prime Minister. He's promising bold action, but also cuts and billions of dollars in deficit in Tuesday's budget.
We are staying calm. We're focusing on what we can control.
Donald Trump and Mark Carney come face to face. The relationship strained, trade talks still terminated. But the Prime Minister says progress is being made with another economic superpower, China. International Trade Minister Maninder Sidhu just got back from Asia, and he will be here. It all starts now on Rosemary Barton Live. Thanks so much for joining us on this Sunday. In just 2 days, the Liberal government will table its highly anticipated budget. It will be the first look at the state of Canada's finances since Mark Carney became Prime Minister. And the countdown is on for Carney and his ministers to find opposition support and dodge a potential second election this year.
I am 100% confident that this budget is the right budget for this country at this moment. This is not a game. This is a critical moment in the global economy, or it's an important moment in the global economy. It's a critical moment for our country.
I sat down with the leader of the official opposition, Pierre Poilievre, in an exclusive interview ahead of Tuesday's federal budget. Pierre Poilievre is, of course, the leader of the official opposition. He joins me in studio. Nice to see you, Mr. Poilievre.
It's good to be with you.
Really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to start with some news that happened on Friday. The Supreme Court struck down another mandatory minimum, this one in relation to possession and access of child pornography. The Supreme Court has struck down a lot of mandatory minimum laws since 2015. But I wonder, in this case, what response you think the government should have in this instance?
Well, first of all, the accused and convicted offenders are appalling, frankly. These are two men who had possession of literally hundreds of images and videos of children. One of them had 377 images of children between 3 and 6 years old. Another had hundreds of videos of children between 5 and 10. They created demand for pornographic material that was made by torturing, humiliating, and defiling innocent children who will never recover from it from the rest of their lives. And frankly, they were originally given 1-year sentences. That was appealed. It should have been way more than 1-year sentence. There should be a mandatory minimum of more, probably 5 or even 10 years. So this ruling is wrong-headed, and I would oppose the ruling, and I would use the notwithstanding clause to overturn it. And my future government will introduce mandatory prison sentences for possession of child pornography so that dirtbags like this go away for a very long time.
Some of the reasoning from the justices was that they could see a scenario where two 18-year-olds exchange images and then have a mandatory minimum imposed on them. I don't know what you make of that reasoning.
I think the Supreme Court needs to get away from these imaginary scenarios. The scenario before them was two men in possession over a long period of time of hundreds of images and videos that were made by torturing innocent children. And with those facts in front of them, their conclusion actually should have been that the sentence should have been met much more than the 1 year and 9 months that the two dirtbag offenders received. They should go away for a very long time. Frankly, if I had my way as a father, I would lock them up and throw away the key.
I want to move on to the budget, because that is, of course, sort of the concern and the focus of the week ahead. That you have criticized the Prime Minister for saying that sacrifices are going to be needed by Canadians. You have also said the deficit must stay at $42 billion. How do you keep the deficit at $42 billion and not make sacrifices and not ask Canadians to make sacrifices?
Well, I think it's a false juxtaposition because the deficit is causing the sacrifices. The more the government spends, the more things cost. The cost of government is driving up the cost of living. These deficits are raising the prices that people pay in real time. It's called inflation, and we know that the source of inflation is when government prints money to spend what it does not have. This bids up the price of goods, and it's why It's no coincidence that during the time the Liberals doubled the national debt, they also doubled housing costs and doubled lineups at food banks. So
except some of the things that will be in the budget will be for housing to help Canadians. That is what they are proposing to do to help Canadians in this moment.
But with every dollar they spend comes from Canadians. And so they remember Justin Trudeau and the previous Liberal government launched a bunch of expensive housing programs saying it would help. It doubled housing costs. They announced food programs. Well, they doubled food bank lineups. So the more government spends, the more it drives up the cost of living. We can't have a costly budget that makes life more costly for the Canadian people. We want them to keep their promise. It was only a year ago that Liberals said they would keep the deficit down to $41 billion. Now, Mark Carney was elected saying he would spend less. And since that time, his deficit spending is 100% more.
But you know that his reasoning, what he will tell Canadians on Tuesday, is that he's investing. It's meant to spur investment in the Canadian economy. Things like defense, housing, as I said, industries dealing with tariffs. What of those things do you not agree with? Because he believes that investment will actually attract private capital and will force the economy to sort of rebuild in the face of Donald Trump.
You know, it seems like a familiar line, because it's exactly what the Liberals promised in 2015, 10 years ago, when they ran on producing small temporary deficits that would invest. And what happened? They doubled the national debt. And what happened to investment? It dropped more than any time in Canadian history and more than any other G7 country. Deficits are not investments. They reduce investments because they borrow money out of the economy that would otherwise have been invested in productive private enterprises, factories, mines, pipelines, LNG plants. So when government borrows, it actually subtracts from the economy by sucking up capital that would have been used for productive purposes. So if we want investment, there's only one thing the government needs to do: get out of the way. There are trillions of dollars of private investment ready to dig mines, build pipelines, set up LNG plants, build ports. We know that money exists because they're doing it in other countries around the world where there is fast approvals, less red tape, low taxes. They get private sector investment, and that's what we want to launch.
But by that explanation, by that rationale, why would you accept a $42 billion deficit? You know, Sean Spears, who was the economic advisor to your former boss, recently said on The Hub, that is a massive shift for a conservative to actually even fathom a $42 billion deficit. Why say that's okay?
It's not okay.
But you're willing to accept it, you're saying.
It's not okay. Yeah. It is the disastrous state we're in after 10 years of Liberal government. We have a situation where it is impossible this fiscal year, because Mr. Carney, maybe if he had introduced the budget at the beginning of the fiscal year like most normal, competent prime ministers would have done, and which all prime ministers used to do, we could have affected the deficit. But, Rosie, the half to 2/3 of the fiscal year is behind us. The money's already spent. So I would be lying to people if I said that I owned a time machine that would allow me to go back and unspend money that Mark Carney has been spending for the last seven months. So I would like a zero deficit, but the Liberals have put us in this mess, and I work with what I got.
So you are not going to support the budget. There's no way you could do that. You can't lose an election, say Mark Carney's the worst, and then support the budget. That's not possible. Right?
Oh, well, I haven't seen the budget. I haven't seen the budget. I don't have telepathic powers to tell you what's in it. If it were to bring down the cost of living, an affordable budget for an affordable living is something that I support.
None of these things are, you know what the deficit's going to be. On that premise alone, I don't imagine you can support the budget.
But in addition to the deficit, I came up with some very collaborative ideas. And I asked, why isn't the government at least considering them? I've said, let's bring down the cost of food by getting rid of the industrial carbon tax on farmers and the people who feed us. Let's get rid of the food packaging tax that adds $1 billion to food prices. The fuel standard tax that's going to jack up gas prices 17 cents. Get rid of all that, and that would make food more affordable for the 2.2 million people lined up at food banks. And if the government were in a collaborative mode, recognizing they only have a minority, they would accept my ideas for an affordable budget for an affordable Canada.
Are you prepared to have an election if that's where we end up?
I'm prepared for an affordable budget. That's what I want the government to introduce. And I'm not going to speak about the plans thereafter because I haven't seen it. But we're not going to. We don't believe that the choice has to be as the Liberals presented, which is between a costly budget and a costly election.
Okay.
You can have an affordable budget, and I've given Mr. Carney a plan for that. All he has to do is accept it.
President Trump said again that talks are not going to be restarted with Canada. Should Canada offer further concessions? Or is at this stage no deal better than a bad deal?
Well, why again are we choosing between two terrible options when we were promised, Mr. Carney promised a good deal by July 21st. He promised he could negotiate a win with President Trump. Those were his promises. Now, some might say, look, it's unrealistic to expect to get that from President Trump. So why did he promise it?
Well,
it was not his only, it wasn't just that it was a promise.
Yeah.
It was the promise.
Except you promised, when you were running to be Prime Minister, that tariffs would be paused across the board and that you would get a deal with Donald Trump with tariffs paused. I mean, that also doesn't seem very plausible given the way the president has behaved.
Well, I have to be Prime Minister for you to find out.
Well,
right? But what we do know is that Mr. Carney is Prime Minister, has been for 7 months, and these are the results that he's got. Since he promised to get rid of American tariffs, they've doubled and tripled in the case of softwood lumber. He says he's going to open up other markets, so he meets with the Chinese. And what do? They increase tariffs on canola, seafood, and pork. He meets with the Indians. What do? Increase tariffs on our peas by 30%. He meets with the Brits. What do? They hit us with blockades of our beef. It seems like everywhere Mark Carney goes, with these grand meetings and photo ops, we end up with more tariffs. His failures abroad are costing us at home.
he met with the Chinese president, though, and they made a decision that their officials were going to get together and try and solve the trade irritants. He is trying to make some progress, no? You don't see those things as a bit of progress?
What progress? Can you name one tariff line that he's reduced abroad?
No, not at this stage, no.
Not one. No. He said 7 months.
So what would
He's been on 20 trips.
What would you like to see him do then? What do you think is the missing piece here?
Keep his promise.
Yeah, but how? It's easy to say that. It's the how that's difficult.
Well, the how, I said that I would face President Trump and the rest of the world from a position of strength. Right now, we're in a position of weakness. The Americans know we can't sell our goods to anyone else because we don't have pipelines and LNG plants to get our most valuable export to other markets. I would pass the Canadian Sovereignty Act, which would rapidly greenlight and legalize pipelines, LNG plants, and other infrastructure.
But the government is doing some of that. There's an LNG plant that's happening. There are major projects.
Approved by Stephen Harper.
Well, there's an expansion of it. There's an expansion of it. And the Major Projects Office, it does allow them to get around laws and regulations. You know, that's the goal of it.
That's the goal. We're 7 months in, and the clock is ticking. I think we've been through enough goal setting, and now it's time for results achieved. And we're not getting any results. Mr. Carney won't even tell us if he supports an oil pipeline to the Pacific. His energy minister says it's just too hypothetical. What do you mean hypothetical? We had a project that was approved prior to the Liberals taking office. So here we are with no progress on expanding our resources or getting things done. It's all very good that he's setting up these offices and agencies in Ottawa, but I've got news for him. We're not going to make our economy economically independent by setting up new bureaucracies in Ottawa.
I want to ask you about leadership because I know that it's probably on your mind. You have a leadership review coming up in January. How confident are you that you will be okay, that you will survive that vote?
Very.
Yeah. Why? What makes you confident?
Well, because I'm going to focus on doing my job. And people say, well, you're going to get distracted with this. And the answer is no, because the same thing I have to do in January is what I have to do on Election Day, which is to do a good job.
Yeah.
And that means doing what I was sent here to do by the record 8.3 million people who voted for us, which is to fight for an affordable life, fight for our young people to be able to afford homes, fight for parents to be able to have safe streets for their kids to grow up on. And that's the job I'm doing, and that's why I believe I'll win the support of both the party and the country.
And you think that the party will be willing to give you a second chance? Because the last time they did that was Stephen Harper.
And look how that turned out.
Yeah,
we were
that's
in
right.
power for 10 years. So
but do you think
I'm
that
glad you pointed that one out.
Do you think that they'll be willing to give you a second chance, Mr. Poilievre?
I think so. I'm fighting for the things that our party and our country need. Mm-hmm. And the great thing about our party is we're united around the things that we believe in and are fighting for. We want balanced budgets and low taxes so people can afford good lives. We want to lock up criminals so that our people are safe. We want to get immigration and borders back under control. We want a common Canadian identity that unites us all. We want to bring back the promise of this country, that anyone who works hard gets a great life. And so the great thing I have, the benefit I have, is a party whose values and interests are aligned with the country's. And that's why I think both January and the next election, will go in the right direction.
Listen, really appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
The minority Liberals have 169 seats. That's just 3 seats shy of a majority, and that means, of course, they need to find 3 MPs from the opposition to either support the budget or not show up that day to ensure that they survive the confidence vote that is attached to the budget. I also spoke with the New Democrats and the Bloc Québécois about whether they will be a budget partner for the government.
We're not interested in playing the partisan game playing that's going to happen. What we want to do is we want to see policies in this budget that respond to the very real struggles that working people are facing right now. And that's what I think responsible opposition is going to do.
Does everyone have to vote the same way in caucus?
On confidence measures, that's the rule.
Are abstentions allowed?
Abstentions are allowed, yeah. I mean, that's, you don't have parties that vote at cross purposes on confidence measures, but it is a tradition in this place that, it is possible for some people to miss the vote or abstain if they want.
We've decided, the Bloc, to be very transparent about our demands. As you said, we've published them, we've made them public a month before the budget to give the government a chance to come back to us and start negotiating and start discussing. But insofar as I know, at the moment, the government didn't seem to be very interested in negotiating.
You can watch those full interviews with the NDP interim leader and the Bloc finance critic and their budget expectations. Catch those at CBCNews.ca and the CBC News YouTube page. Ahead of Tuesday's budget, the Prime Minister has been spending a lot of time seeking stronger ties with Asia. Mark Carney met with Chinese President Xi Jinping last week. It marks the first meeting between the two countries' leaders in nearly 8 years.
We have to talk to each other if we want to make progress and address issues. We agreed this meeting marked a turning point in our bilateral relationship.
But what exactly does a turning point mean for a relationship complicated by high trade tariffs on major Canadian exports like canola and seafood? The International Trade Minister just got back from Asia late last night, and he'll be here live. That's next. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has returned from his trip to Asia, where he met with leaders, including Chinese President Xi Jinping, in an attempt to expand Canada's trading relationships beyond the United States. The International Trade Minister, Maninder Sidhu, was on that trip, and he joins me live from Brampton this morning. Nice to see you, Minister.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Rosemary. I just want to start by giving the Blue Jays a huge shout out. It's an incredible season, incredible team. I was 9 years old when Joe Carter hit that last one in 1992-93, and my daughter's 9, so we got to watch it together. And phenomenal, huge shout out to the Blue Jays for bringing Canadians together.
I will allow a shout out, given it's our only baseball team, and it was a good run. Thank you for that. Let's get down to business. So Canada and China, I guess, are talking again. The Prime Minister has described this as a turning point, but Canada has imposed, or still has, 100% tariffs on Chinese EV vehicles. As you know, China retaliated, putting tariffs on canola and agricultural goods. Where does that stand now, Minister? What is the likelihood that that can get resolved, given the Chinese side has said Canada must remove the EV tariffs first?
Yeah, look, with China, it's very important. They're our second largest trading partner. In South Korea, I sat down with my counterpart as well, Minister Wang. The Prime Minister sat down with his counterpart as well to work through some of these trade irritants around pet food, beef, canola. Meeting with stakeholders, that's exactly what they want us to do. And you're right, the relationship was dormant for about over 7 years. There was no conversations going on. The JETSI Commission to work through some of these trade irritants was not, very active. And so we need to make sure we restart that. That's now been restarted. Having those conversations, having that dialogue will allow us to work through some of the challenges, but also we sat down and we explored other opportunities. If you look at our energy sector and what China's doing in terms of energy storage, there's a lot of opportunities there in terms of technology and capabilities. And so, we're going to work through those challenges, but we're also going to explore opportunities.
But is it your understanding that as you work through the challenges, as you call them, that if one side ditches the tariffs, the other side will? I mean, that would have to happen, I imagine, if for Canada to go ahead with that.
So these are very live conversations. You did mention EVs, and that's the Minister of Finance is reviewing that right now. But what I can tell you is, actively sitting down with the Chinese is helping work through the dialogue on these. And it's not the first time we've had ministers visit China now. And so stepping up our engagement is very, very important. If you're having those conversations, you're able to work through the challenges.
I was just talking to the leader of the official opposition. We talked on Friday, and one of the things that he criticized the government for and the Prime Minister for is going overseas, having these trips, and coming back with no real results. What would you say in response to that?
Well, look, if I look at what we did in the ASEAN region in Malaysia, that's an important region. Just last year, trade grew by roughly 10%, one of the fastest growing regions in the world in terms of trade with Canada. You look at what Malaysia Petronas is doing with LNG Canada. I was in Kitimat, BC, talking to the workers from New Brunswick, from Ontario, from Alberta that helped build that. 20,000 workers. They're looking to double their investments. And so the Prime Minister and I were there to talk to some of these companies, because if they're going to double investment, that means work for 20,000 more workers. And so these are tangible conversations leading to tangible work opportunities for Canadians. And I think that's exactly what Canadians expect us to do. We also relaunched negotiations with the Philippines, a free trade agreement with the Philippines. Of course, relaunched negotiations with Thailand. Both those countries represent roughly 180 million people, Rosemary. And so we're there. We're opening up opportunities, as the Prime Minister promised Canadians, to diversify our trading partnerships. I
know you're not in the negotiations with the United States, but you're sort of, adjacent to it, because your job is to find all these other partners. I wonder how... What you think is the likelihood of the United States coming back to the table, given Donald Trump has said, even after the Prime Minister apologized for this ad by the Ontario Premier, that he doesn't want to talk?
Yeah, so on the U.S., as you said, Minister LeBlanc is leading those conversations, but it's very important to mention that the U.S. will always be an important trading partner to Canada. The geography is not going to change. And so as those conversations continue, my job is to focus on diversifying our trading partnerships with new markets, but also some of the mature markets that we already deal with. And so there are a lot of opportunities. Other countries, Rosemary, I can tell you, are getting more ambitious. They're more aggressive on the ground. They're present. And any person with credible business experience will tell you that deals are not signed on the first handshake. It takes time, and we need to be able to be there with presence, with sustained presence, to be there in the region to make sure that we're able to showcase Canadian innovation, Canadian technology. Another example I'll give you, Rosemary, is CAE, a flight training Canadian company. 4,000 workers in Quebec. They're supporting hundreds of small and mid-sized businesses. They're looking to rapidly expand into that region. We're going to be there to support them as well.
But let me ask you this. Are those businesses and those places more attracted to Canada because we're not throwing tariffs all around willy-nilly? Like, is that argument resonating in a different way?
Canada is seen as a reliable and stable trading partner. So the calls that I'm getting is Canada is a beacon of hope, international rules-based order, trading order, and I think we need to continue focusing on that. That's where Canada shines. We've got 15 trade agreements already with 51 countries, access to 1.5 billion consumers. I just wrapped up negotiations with Ecuador. We signed a free trade agreement with Indonesia a few weeks ago, a country that's going to be the 5th largest economy in the world with 275 million people. We're looking at the Middle East in terms of investment and promotion agreements. I think we need to do more of that. And so as countries call us, we need to be there to answer that call and be there in the region to promote Canadian companies.
I want to ask you a budget question if I can, because it's on Tuesday. The Prime Minister has said to expect generational investments. It is also going to include cuts. How worried should Canadians be that those cuts will affect some of the services that they get from the government?
So, Rosemary, a little over 6 months ago, Canadians asked us to, make generational investments to create opportunities for them. That's exactly what this budget will do, to create those opportunities for Canadian workers, for Canadian businesses. We're in a time of crisis. This is not a joke anymore. We need to be able to focus on Canadians, and that's exactly what this government will be doing on Tuesday. I know many Canadians are excited to see what's in the budget, and I won't scoop our Minister of Finance, but I think Canadians will be happy with what's in the budget.
Will they be happy with what's in the budget if they also know that there's a huge price tag attached? $70 to $100 billion in deficit. That could be a hard sell for some people, Minister.
So there's ambitious investments, but there's also rigorous discipline in this budget. And every dollar that we spend will go further to help build Canada as the strongest economy in the G7. You talk about housing, you talk about infrastructure, talk about catalyzing enormous private investments. We've got a target of expanding trade by $300 billion in non-U.S. exports within the next 10 years. You can't do that without adding capacity at the ports. And we need to be able to attract investments, as the Prime Minister and I were doing in Asia. We need to be able to grow trade with trading partners, and that's what we'll focus on.
Okay, Minister of International Trade, Maninder Sidhu, thank you for making the time. I appreciate you keeping the hope alive with your jersey still on the next morning.
We've got to stay at it. We got next year, but thanks again, Rosemary.
Okay, thanks, Minister. Nice to see you. Up next, the Sunday Scrum will be here to give us their thoughts on our conversation with the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, and of course, we'll talk to them about that budget and the anxiety, the little bit of election anxiety that's stirring up. We're back into. Of course, Canadians, you are watching closely as Mark Carney prepares to table the first federal budget. It's his finance minister who will do it, obviously, but it's his budget too. A moment that could define the future of the country's economic direction. With affordability and housing still top of mind, many people are hoping it will bring some relief. Alex Kimball is feeling some of those economic pressures so many people are feeling right now, and he joins me now. Nice to see you, Alex.
Nice to see you too.
So as I alluded to, like lots of Canadians struggling with different things right now, rent or food. Give me a sense of the kinds of changes you've had to make to your life to be able to afford to live.
I've had to cut back how much I go grocery shopping. I don't go to the store as much as I used to. And when I do, I'm always looking through the flyers to see what the best deals are, and I'm calculating it up in my head before I get to the cash register about whether I can afford it or not. And sometimes I'm seeing myself put stuff back just because it's not in the budget. I can't afford it.
Yeah.
And I make a pretty good wage doing what I do, so I can only imagine those, on minimum wage or making below me. And so to see that, it's like, wow, this is a real eye-opener. As far as rent went, we ended up leaving our rental situation to move in with my grandmother. She was so nice to let us come live with her, to help us try to get ahead, to be able to try to save to buy a home, because it looked very out of reach paying rent where we were. And we were at a quite affordable place, I might add.
Yeah, and I know you recently got married, and I don't know whether that, was impacted at all, too, by how tight everything feels right now.
Yeah, I mean, I love the woman that I married. I'm very thankful for her. But I said to her, look, with the way the economy's going, it's now or never. I love you. I know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you, and it's not going to get any cheaper. So let's get married. And we did it very frugally, I would say, but we did it with much love, and it turned out to be the day that we wanted it to be. And but it was definitely different compared to what I would have expected that my parents and grandparents went through.
So obviously, we're talking a lot about the budget, and we'll see whether there's anything in there that would help someone like you. But what would help right now, or what are you waiting for to change for things to improve?
I'm waiting to see investments in jobs. I know a lot of my colleagues who are just graduating now. I decided to leave school a year early to get ahead, to work and go to school at the same time. And a lot of my colleagues decided not to do the same thing. But I saw the writing on the wall. I saw where the economy was headed. And I said, I need to get in the job market now. And that was in 2024. And so what I'm looking for is to help my friends and colleagues out is investments in jobs. We need to create certainty in this uncertain economy. Yeah. And so I'm going to be looking at the budget and seeing where is the Prime Minister investing to make this economy certain, so private investors will invest in it too and see the success story that Canada really is.
And do you think he can do it? He said in a speech just a week or two ago, this is going to take some time. Do you think that you have the time, that you can wait for those things to happen?
I think time's quickly running out. He made a comment about sacrifices. Young people have been asked to make sacrifices during COVID, after COVID, because of the spending during COVID, that things were going to be tight. Time's running out for young people. They're going to go jobless. They're going to lose their homes if they have them. They're not going to be able to have a home if things keep going the way they go. Time is running out, and it's running out quickly. And so my message to Prime Minister Carney is we need to do something, and now's the time to do it. And we need to start pivoting. The automotive sector in Ontario, they're going to start losing jobs because the companies are going to the States. And so let's build modular houses in some of these factories. We need housing. That drives the price of housing down when there's more housing, makes it more affordable. So let's start making the things that we need.
Alex Kimball, nice of you to make the time. I mean, I really appreciate your thoughtful answers, and let's speak again.
Most certainly. Thank you for having me, Rosemary.
It is still unclear right now who's going to support this Liberal budget as the minority government faces its first big confidence test. Let's bring back the Sunday Scrum. Émilie Nicolas, columnist for Le Devoir. Stephanie Levitz, a senior reporter in the Globe and Mail's Parliament Hill Bureau. Ryan Tumulty is a Toronto Star political reporter here in Ottawa. Émilie, I'm going to start with you. I guess what are you anticipating Tuesday will be like in terms of how the vision that the government's going to set forward, and then how those opposition parties respond, because they all seem to just be sort of waiting and keeping their powder dry?
So in terms of the opposition party, just from listening to the interviews you did on the beginning of the show, it seems to me that the NDP is going to be blinking, and so that's where the votes are going to come from. As far as the vision of the government, I think it's going to take us a lot of time as journalists to unpack everything in the budget. There's going to be a lot of different announcements in there. We got used to have kind of a budget striptease of different policies. It's been more of a let's get it all out on Tuesday this time around. I think there's going to be a lot of things and people who are watching for climate that are going to be disappointing. I think in terms of the economy, there's going to be massive announcements that will need a lot to unpack as well. In terms of where the cuttings will be and what are investments and what will be still done, it will also take a lot of time for a lot of people to digest. I also think in terms of the opposition party, the Conservative will oppose. That's the official position. And as far as the Bloc Québécois is concerned, we are today in a municipal election in Quebec, and the provincial government is going into a crisis. And so I think it's worth for people to understand that the Bloc is playing games in Parliament with literally no one in Quebec paying attention to Ottawa right now, because everybody's busy with provincial and municipal election as far as the Bloc electorate is, and so they're speaking a really great game, but they're speaking it in English only as far as airtime is concerned right now.
Right. Yeah, it's not penetrating. That's interesting.
No.
Yeah. No, Steph, what are you going to be watching for on Tuesday? I mean, I said in our newsletter this morning, it's actually a budget that sometimes you can just sort of skim a budget. That's not going to be the case here. We're really going to have to dig in and try to figure out where everything is and where it's going.
I think that's exactly it. And I'll reflect, in the short tenure Mr. Carney has been prime minister in this country, communications are not always his strong suit, nor that of the current iteration of his government. And, they've made choices. They've made choices not to roll out anything before. And again, that's a choice. But I'm curious to see how they communicate it all, Rosemary, how they package it, how they sell it to Canadians. How much of what is in there on Tuesday is the exact same thing that Mr. Carney ran on in the most recent spring election? Because should, I suppose, the government fall in a matter of weeks, so help us all, we're heading to a winter election, and effectively this budget would become the platform. So is this a continuation of what he's previously promised? And I'm also really looking for, and with great anticipation, although I'll probably end up disappointed, is detail, specifics. If they are really truly cutting spending to the way they say they are, what are they cutting and how are they doing it? And what are they going to do, if anything, to mitigate some of the blow of those cuts? Because it could be very real for people. Yep.
Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be really interesting to see this budget as sort of the full Carney doctrine. The government has not only not revealed things about the budget in advance, but they've crammed other things that aren't traditionally part of the budget into Tuesday. So Canada's new immigration levels are going to be revealed as part of the budget. We expect some of the climate competitiveness strategy to be part of this budget. So we're really going to get this final picture of what Mark Carney intends to do with the government of Canada. The cuts are going to have real impacts. We know that. We know they can't just be, attrition and cutting back on Post-it notes. This is going to be significant. So you're going to get a real sense of what this government is going to do. And I don't think, if you look back to 1994, 95, when Paul Martin made his sort of huge budget, they rolled that out over a number of years. Mark Carney doesn't have that luxury.
No.
So everything that we're going to see is going to come out on Tuesday. It's a big day for this government.
But Steph, I'll just go back to you. Conservatives don't want an election right now. I mean, I know that Pierre Poilievre was not in any way definitive with me, but surely that's not something that would make sense for them right now either.
No, I mean, in so many ways, it wouldn't make sense. And, there's a lot of joking going around on the Hill the last few days about, okay, how's this budget going to pass? And more than one Conservative MP being like, hey, man, put some community centers in my riding and I'm your guy. Like, nobody wants this election. And the math that'll be required, we're not talking a yawning gap of votes that are required, Rosemary, right? I mean, we're talking a handful, 3, 4. There's a lot of ways to get to 4 votes for your budget that don't involve the Conservative Party, the official opposition, en masse voting for it, or the Bloc, or the New Democrats. So, whether that means horse trading. And again, I find this part kind of politically very interesting to watch, because Mr. Carney really doesn't seem to have any interest in playing politics whatsoever with this. I mean, we can, or, generally think about how fast he put Pierre Poilievre back in the House of Commons by calling that by-election. So if there's no horse trading available, if there's no, okay, fine, I will give you those community centers, if he's not interested in that, the onus really does become on the opposition parties to figure out a way. And, the run of Harper Conservative minority governments, 06, 08, at least one of those budgets passed because the Liberal caucus just sort of shrugged and said, you know what, we just really don't want an election. So how about some of you just don't vote?
Yeah. And I would think, Emily, some of that may just be because, some Conservatives don't think it's the worst budget ever. And they just either don't show up, or to your point, that the NDP just allows some people to abstain.
Yes. And yes to the NDP. As far as the Conservatives are concerned, it was also just, 2 weeks ago that Pierre Poilievre was in the middle of a trouble for going after Justin Trudeau, and that revealed some tensions within his caucus of, some Conservative MPs thinking that Mark Carney isn't the worst, and that the hyper-partisan attacks are actually creating lines of tensions and fictions within Conservatives, not only caucus, but also their membership and their base as well. Yeah. And so they're also speaking a good game with not as much of a leg to stand on than they could pretend they do.
Last word to you, Ryan.
I mean, I agree with everything that's been said so far. I'll say this, though. I talked to MPs from all parties. Everyone says they don't want an election. But it's like they're all in a car driving towards a cliff and waiting for someone to grab the steering wheel, and no one seems to want to grab it, as if they don't really understand what the steering wheel is for.
Well, we'll hope it's not a Thelma and Louise moment on Tuesday.
I mean, I don't really want to campaign. I don't know anyone who does, but stranger things have happened.
That's right. That's right. We're ready for anything. Thank you all for being here on this Sunday. Appreciate it. Nice to see you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Tuesday's budget comes as the Bank of Canada released its latest interest rate decision last week, bringing the overnight rate down for the second consecutive time. Desjardins Group Chief Economist Jimmy Jong joins me next about the state of the Canadian economy. Stick around. Lots of anticipation for Tuesday's federal budget as the government looks to boost the economy that is facing pressure from U.S. tariffs and trade uncertainty. The Bank of Canada just last week cutting the overnight interest rate 25 basis points, with Governor Tiff Macklem saying they are expecting weak growth in the Canadian economy through 2026. With me now to talk about the state of the Canadian economy ahead of the upcoming budget is Jimmy Jean. He is the Vice President, Chief Economist and Strategist with Desjardins Group. Nice to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to start with what often gets a lot of attention on budget day, and then we can dig a little bit deeper. But the deficit, we are expecting it to be in the range of $70 to $100 billion. I know there's other indicators to look at when you're evaluating the state of the economy, but how concerned are you if we see a deficit of that size?
Well, by now, it's pretty much, it's given the streak of announcements we've been getting since the beginning of the year, that's pretty much, we're at 75 billion. So it's part of the psyche. It would be surprised if it were something significantly lower than that. So I think by now, really, the focus is not so much on yes, it's still the size of the deficits, but what they're used for. Really, what's the end game for that we're getting in return to incurring these big deficits, and that speaks to whether those deficits will be producing the sort of economic growth that will be needed down the line in order to make those deficits sustainable.
So what will you look for then to get a sense of whether this is, in fact, as the Prime Minister has said, to try and attract investment and get more growth? Where will you look at where the money is going? How will you make that determination?
We've seen those announcements about nation-building projects. There's a first set of projects that have been announced. There's a second announcement that will be made mid-November. So really, it's about the selection of those projects. But also, I think, and that's the part that's more difficult to know beforehand, is how well the government will be able to execute them. Because making major investments, that's not a new story. When the Trudeau government got elected, the Invest in Canada plan had $185 billion they were supposed to inject into the economy. They ended up delivering only $110 billion, and that's the result of those difficulties in executing and delivering those projects. So really, that's going to be the big focus. The Carney government has put in place a number of structures that it promises will be able to deliver, but there's no way of knowing beforehand. So it's going to be a little bit of a leap of faith. We know with infrastructure there tends to be cost overruns, delays. Any infrastructure project you've seen in the last 5 years has been subject to that. But the key is whether the private sector really wants to join in, wants to participate, whether it has the proper signal really to get private investment unlocked.
And given sort of the instability of the world, I would argue right now, because of Donald Trump's trade war on us and others, would you expect that there might be something in the budget to reflect that instability and what Canada has been, the pressure Canada has been under because of the tariffs?
Right, but I think the Carney government and Prime Minister Carney himself, the consistent message has been we need to focus on what's in our control. And so that means leveraging our endowments in things like critical minerals. It means trying to diversify our export markets. Now, none of that will happen overnight, that's for sure. So there's going to need to some patience, which is in short supply these days. But we do need to work more fundamentally on competitiveness, on productivity. And that's where we've been failing consistently over decades. If we're not competitive enough, we're not going to have markets or market shares that we're going to be able to grab in overseas markets, be it in Asia or be it in Europe. And so I'm going to be looking very closely as to what the budget proposes in terms of incentives to really get private investment going, and particularly in everything that relates to innovation, AI, which the U.S. does very well right now, and where we have a lag, and R&D.
Okay, last question. I know that growth is projected to be soft again in 2026. Is a recession still a possibility, or could this budget and what it lays out sort of be a buffer against that?
Well, we just had the numbers on Friday, and the indication here is that the GDP could come in at a positive 0.6% in the third quarter after registering a 1.6% decline in the second quarter. So good news is that we're not in recession. We continue to see some resilience on the consumer front, and even on the home building front. The Bank of Canada is cutting rates, so that provides a bit of support. The government also cut taxes. So we don't expect the economy to undergo recession. We think domestic demand is still resilient, and much of our economy is not really directly exposed, at least to tariffs. But it's still the case that in those industrial sectors that are directly affected by sectoral tariffs, you're going to see weakness. You're going to see closures and job losses.
Okay, Jimmy Jean, always nice to see you. Thank you for making the time for us today. Jimmy Jean is the Vice President, Chief Economist and Strategist with Desjardins Group. CBC News will, of course, have extensive coverage of the Carney government's first federal budget on Tuesday. I'll be hosting a special that will begin at 3 p.m. Eastern on CBC Television, CBC News Network, and streaming wherever you get CBC News. Power and Politics host David Cochran will join me as of 4 o'clock when we will start looking at the details of the budget and explaining them to you. At Issue will be there too. Hope you can join us on Tuesday. I'll see you then, if not before. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great Sunday.